Thank you so much for this nice introduction. I'm very happy to be back in Genk. It's actually where I've been born, so in a way it's a sort of homecoming. And that's actually also the theme of the presentation that I would like to give you here. Many of you might have heard of the overview effect. It's an effect experienced by astronauts when they saw the Earth from out of space as a little fragile ball in a huge black environment. And I would like to speak today about the Innerview effect, because the transition to a more sustainable and more just society will only begin when we humans shift our perspective. So let me start by introducing you to Joey, the shelter dog we adopted 10 years ago. I don't know, can we maybe dim the light a little bit so people can see the pictures a bit better? So I mentioned Joey because he taught me an important lesson in humility. You see, for years, Joey sneezed and sneezed, upon which our other dog started sneezing as well. And all I did was wonder whether they might be allergic to something in the house. Until one day, I came across a scientific study that showed that African wild dogs use sneezing as an important communication signal. The study showed that these dogs use sneezing as a voting system or quorum to organize activities. When sufficient dogs sneeze, the group changes activity. So sneezing is used to initiate action. Both my face and brain smiled when the aha moment finally struck. That dog must have thought, my human is really slow when it comes to understanding such a simple communication signal. For years, he tried to communicate to me that it's time to go outside and start our daily hike in nature by coming up to me and sneezing, and I just didn't get it. I share this story because as humans, we need to reinstall humility. You see, I'm a trained biologist with a PhD in animal communication. Still, it took me years and a study on African wild dogs to finally understand why Joey sneezes at specific times during the day. So the interesting question here is, how did I, someone with all the credentials to be regarded as an expert, take such a long time in understanding such a simple signal? Well, I'll tell you why. Our cognitive, scientific, and agrarian revolutions have disconnected us from the natural world. It has made us believe that we are separate from and better than nature. But this false sense of superiority and the separateness are illusions. We are nature. And most importantly, we're not superior to it. In fact, nature is much smarter than we think we are. If you're not convinced by the story from Joey, let me introduce you to Otto, an octopus that kept the entire aquarium in the dark, literally for days. You see, the Sea Star Aquarium in Germany was getting blackouts during the nights, and it took a highly educated staff 3 days to figure out it was Otto, a 6-month-old octopus who was responsible for the repeated power failures. Evidently, Otto had learned to balance on the edge of his tank and shoot out the annoying 2000-watt spotlight above with a carefully directed jet of water. This made me think of marine scientist Mark Nolan, a leading scientist in the field, who pointedly stated that most of the tests on octopus intelligence actually demonstrate the lack of intelligence in the researchers. An insight that's probably true for most of our quests to understand cleverness in organisms other than ourselves. These stories illustrate that we're not so smart as we think we are. Just look at the state of the world today. Our so-called sapiens logic of value creation leads to degradation because it is out of sync with the way life works. So what if we came down from our self-made pedestal? What if we broadened our concept of intelligence to include natural intelligence? The combination of all success factors that have allowed life to endure despite millions of years of change, disruption, and major upheaval. It is the kind of intelligence that is deeply embedded in all the survival champions that have learned what works, what can last, and most importantly, what contributes to life on Earth. This matters because science is finally catching up and uncovering just how sophisticated nature works. For instance, did you know that these guys are our most effective and efficient solution to curb climate change? Researchers have discovered that whales play a vital role in climate regulation. You see, whales feed at depth, and they return to the surface area to breathe and poo. These poonamis are rich in iron and nitrogen, nutrients that are vital for phytoplankton. Phytoplankton are tiny microscopic organisms that live only in the upper layer of the ocean, because this is the only place where they can photosynthesize. And without the whales, they cannot survive, which is kind of a big deal, because phytoplankton is the foundation on which the entire ocean ecosystem depends. These tiny microscopic organisms are the powerhouses of the sea. They're so mighty that the oceans could not function without them. That is because they turn the energy from the sun into food for all other aquatic organisms. You might wonder, how is this linked to the climate? Well, through this process of photosynthesis, phytoplankton draw down billions of tons of carbon from the atmosphere every year and transport it deep into the ocean where it can be stored for centuries. In doing so, they produce almost half of all the oxygen in the world. Phytoplankton are thus not only the powerhouses of the sea, they're the Earth's main oxygen-producing manufacturer. So here is why the whales are so incredibly important. Whales manage the marine circular economy in a way that sustains Earth's vital processes. They're the main caretakers of our climate here on Earth. In short, whales cool the climate. They give us air to breathe. A recent study from the International Monetary Fund showed that restoring the whale populations to their pre-whaling numbers is the best climate solution we have today. A solution that has worked for millions of years and does not entail risky side effects like man-made technologies. And the whales are not alone when it comes to leaving a beneficial impact. Astounding scientific evidence shows that reintroducing wolves enables the restoration of degraded ecosystems. Because although a predator, wolves give much more life than they take. Their activities leave the ecosystem richer, stronger, and more resilient for the future. But that is not all the wolves achieve. The Yellowstone Wolf Reintroduction Project shows us that wolves not only impact the living world, they change the non-living worlds with their actions too. The wolves, though small in number, altered the geography of the land by changing the course of the river, and this in a stunningly short time period, thereby showing us that small changes can cascade into big change in less than a decade. So in a way, the wolves give us hope because they show that fundamental transformation is possible and that it does not require generations nor great numbers to radically transform a system. In other words, the transition to a healthier and more sustainable world is not only possible, it's imminent. If we, just like the wolves, create the right enabling conditions, we can heal every place we touch. And it's not only the big animals that leave things better for the next generations. Small animals like termites do this too. Science shows that termite bioengineering prevents desertification and makes the land more resilient to climate change. These tiny insects, with a brain no bigger than a grain of sand, store nutrients, moisture, and seeds in their termite mounds, the high rises of the insect world. In doing so, they create little oases that can sustain vegetation with less rain than environments without termites. In other words, termites green the desert. Their life generates more life, just like the whales and the wolves. You might think that these are just exceptions, but they are not. Nature holds more superheroes than the Marvel Studios can imagine. Fungi mine rocks, plankton create clouds, foxes green the tundra, mushrooms make rain, forests foster community, pumas breed beetles, mangroves protect coastlines, beavers hold back wildfires, whales cool the climate, wolves restore ecosystems, termites green the desert. These stories illustrate that there is an intelligence behind the success of the natural world. For the life that prevails over millions of years of selection is the life that creates conditions conducive to life. Leave it better than you found it. That is the way life works. I call this NI, or natural intelligence, because it represents life's logic behind 3.8 billion years of success on planet Earth. In other words, regeneration is nature's blueprint for innovation. Because at its core, what endures over time always creates conditions that are pro-life. From a big history perspective, this means that the most basic foundation, the ground rule of life on Earth, is that life creates conditions that are beneficial for life, leaving the planet better off than before. And here is where it gets really interesting. Once you understand how life works, you will see that sustainability is the byproduct of regeneration. Now, what if this insight has consequences far beyond the field of biology? What if it's actually most relevant for our economy? We all know that our existing economic situation leads to degradation, a process of decline and deterioration, while nature's primordial trade system leads to regeneration, a process of renewal and revitalization that leaves the planet healthier, wealthier, and more alive than before. So what if this process of regeneration is exactly what is needed to reboot our economy, as its essence is about value creation, the very process that fuels our economic activity? Now, the economists in the room might experience a bit of unease, but consider this. Trees and fungi established one of the first trade associations already 400 million years ago. Put simply, trees are sugar daddies that trade their sun-derived sugars for soil-bound nutrients produced by fungal mineral mamas. This alliance between the trees and the fungi means that together they can access far more resources than they could on their own. But that is not the main thing. Their symbiosis leaves the entire ecosystem healthier, wealthier, and better equipped to deal with change and disturbance. That is, the trade system that drives forest growth leaves the entire planet better off. It gives life air to breathe, food to eat, medicine to heal, and material to build. It improves nutrient and water circulation, regulates the climate, builds soil, cleans air, and harbors a whole ecosystem of species in the process. Even we humans are a product from the forest. It's where we originated. You can still see evidence of this in the fact that forests boost our immune system and promote our well-being. More than 1,000 scientific studies attest to this. So imagine what we can achieve if we found our economic logic not on the take-make-waste paradigm of today, but on the life-giving capacity of natural intelligence, regenerating environments everywhere we go. This matters because even though we humans tend to forget, we share the same purpose as the rest of life. Life wants to live. Life wants to stay alive. Therefore, the quest before us is one of rediscovering essence. The essence of how life works and how we humans, just like the whales, the wolves, the fungi, and all other survival heroes, can contribute to the continuation and regeneration of life. That is why it's time to expand our concept of intelligence to include natural intelligence, the art and science of surviving and thriving on a continuously changing planet with limited resources. It is about re-envisioning our relationship with Earth, with nature, and our role here on Earth. Because only then can we overcome the deeply ingrained degenerative patterns of control and demand, of manipulation and exploitation, behaviors that reinforce the status quo. Only then can we start to design and develop from a logic of regenerative value creation, creating conditions that are good for life, cascading positive impacts with everything that we do. If we develop nature-based solutions from this consciousness, from this inner view, then we will no longer be stealing the future, but will be healing it instead. Each of us has the power to hold the world in our hands and breathe it back to life. Now that Joey understands that I know what it means when he sneezes, he's using the sneezing communication signal in other situations. Actually, he's now training me to give him a treat on demand. And with a smile like that, who can resist? It goes to show that we are not the only ones teaching. Nature teaches us too. So I invite you to think, how are you learning from nature? And most importantly, how will you leave the planet better than you found her? Thank you.
Thank you, Leen, for sharing this amazing insight on all these creatures, on Joey and Otto. We have now room for some questions. For the people who are present in the auditorium, please raise your hand, and then our colleague Anne-Katrien will come over. Or the people at home, please type it in the chat, and then we will read it out loud here in the auditorium. Yeah, it's hard to see.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay, I have one question from the online audience. They ask, how can we use this insight, this natural intelligence, in other, or as a design principle, or how can we use it in other ecosystems or other conditions?
That's kind of a broad question. I guess what I started with is that a lot of the problems we are facing today is because we look at the world as a machine, not as a living system. And we design solutions coming from a reductionist logic. And that's why we still haven't been able to really resolve the problems of unsustainability so far. So if we learn how nature works, how everything is interconnected and interdependent, we might change our perspective and move away from this machine logic of reality. And that will give us tools to design different solutions. Solutions that do not create 10 different problems elsewhere, but solutions that create more solutions down the line. And I guess this kind of logic, natural intelligence, you can apply it everywhere, right? You can apply it to product design, you can apply it to how we organize our organizations, you can apply it to how we develop systems, you can even apply it to the economy. But without this shift in mindset, it will not be successful. So I guess first we all need to go outside and let nature teach us a few lessons on what it means to be regenerative. So yeah, that would be my answer to that. Other questions? Yeah.
Because there's still lots of opportunities and needs for more sustainable development also around here. So
yeah, thank you. That's a really good question. And I guess if you look at nature-based solutions, there's so much potential because we really need to reconnect humans back to nature. But if we implement a nature-based solution in kind of the technological fix modus, as we have been doing in the past, then we still miss a lot of extra potential that is out there. So what if a government or a city could adopt this logic of a for-life logic? So with every decision, you will not only look at the economic return, the return on investment, but you look at the life's investment. How much more life does it promote, does it generate? How much more health does this solution bring to our city? And I guess if we find the courage to include this kind of looking at things, this natural intelligence, then we can come up with much more innovative ways of implementing solutions and much more innovative models of nature-based solutions, which down the line will not only bring a lot of health to the city, but also economic return. Because, you know, a lot of money is lost at this moment because the world and we humans are in very poor health. So I guess it's shifting from a for-profit to a for-life logic, or at least inviting a for-life logic to the table, is a good way to do that. And last week in the Netherlands, an initiative has been launched. I forgot the name, but it's an initiative where in their board they have included nature. So the plants and the animals can co-decide with the humans about the strategies of the future. So that, I think, is like a really good step in the right direction that we could apply. Someone else? It's still morning. I see a hand there.
Thank you. Well, my question goes more towards the concept of natural or nature intelligence. Coming from a background of psychology, the concept of intelligence has really resulted in trying to make an IQ, trying to quantify it, and that has actually done more harm than it has done good. So what would you suggest to how we actually go further with this concept?
Well, we know what didn't work, or where the negative byproducts were when we tried to measure IQ and set up educational discourses solely based on IQ. So let's not make the same mistakes with natural intelligence. Let's learn from the mistakes of our past, and also let's not focus or stare towards only one direction, but really set up the conditions so that all the perspectives can come together in a meaningful way, so that we can actually elevate the way that we're thinking and the way that we are solving problems. I don't know how we're doing for time, but...
That was the last question, I'm afraid.
Okay, that was the last question. Thank you so much for being here so early in the morning, and I wish you a really nice rest of the day. Thank you.